You're not running out of time. My camera's running out of time.
Oh.
We have some time, although there is some time on it. You tell us the Hurricane Hazel story.
Whoa. Okay. That's a long story. You may not have time on camera.
Well, let's give it a shot.
Okay. Well, we'll do what we can. Because there's some things I want to say about Hurricane Hazel that have never been said. And I've been waiting for the right time to say them. And I think I said that to you. Didn't I say that to you? Because I think I told you that's why God's let me live so long, is He wants me to tell the story right. Where do I start? At the honeymoon? Well, I have to start at the honeymoon, but the marriage anyway. Jerry and I were married October 9th, 1954. And he was a paratrooper. He was stationed at Fort Bragg, of course. And we met in Whiteville. And I was an avid roller skater. But I only got to roller skate when I could get somebody to take me to Ocean Drive, where they had a skating rink. Ocean Drive now being North Myrtle Beach. But that's where I learned to skate, at the pavilion there in Ocean Drive, and did most of my skating when I was a kid. And anyway, but Jerry was an avid roller skater also, and being in the airborne and stationed in Fayetteville, the only place that he could find a skating rink in southeastern North Carolina was a portable skating rink that had come to Whiteville for the summer. And so I was spending my weekends on Long Beach and in Whiteville during the week. That's my summer after my graduation from high school, and I was waiting for the time to go to school. And so anyway, I went skating every Wednesday night. I went to the skating rink. And so he had come down from Fort Bragg, and he would, once he found out there was somebody in this little hick town that knew how to roller skate as well as he did, he started coming. I mean, he wouldn't miss a Wednesday night. So our courtship started and was maintained on the roller rink in Whiteville, North Carolina. So we were married on October the 9th, 1954. And we went to Long Beach to my parents' little house there. It wasn't really a house, but anyway, it was their summer place, and we all loved it. So we went there. Actually, Jerry, not having been at the beach very much in his life, I can't say he never was, but not like I lived there. And because I was born and raised at Myrtle Beach. So we went to Long Beach for our honeymoon, to my parents' little place. And actually we had gone home as my parents' home. That very week we went there on Wednesday, guess what, to go roller skating and to have dinner with my folks and spend the night. And then the next morning we were heading back to the beach house at Long Beach. And during the lunch hour, the 12 o'clock news came on, and the weatherman said that there was a hurricane that had been named Hazel, and it was currently in the Bahama area, but it was traveling at a for a hurricane, a high rate of speed. It was moving pretty fast up the coast. And of course, being a 17-year-old kid that had just gotten married, you can tell I wasn't very smart. So I didn't pay much attention to what the weatherman said. We heard it, but we didn't care. And so we headed back to the house at the beach. And we were just moseying along because it had started sprinkling rain. And we were just moseying there, and we decided we'd go over to Holden Beach, go across. They had a little ferry thing that took you across back then. And just ride around and look at Holden Beach and then get on to Long Beach. And so the closer we got to Long Beach, the harder it rained. We had really planned to go to the drive-in movie theater that was there in the forks of the road, Highway 211, and it's actually where that shopping center is now. The Beach Road and Highway 211. There was a drive-in movie there, and we used to all like pile into one car and go to that movie. So Jerry and I thought we would go to the movie that night, but by the time it was dark enough to go to the movie, it was raining so hard you couldn't see the movie. So the rain just kept coming in, and of course, being there again, 17 years old and stupid, we didn't have a radio there. I only had my record player and all my 45 records, those jewels with the big holes in them. That's all I had there for entertainment. We didn't have a radio, and not in my part of the house anyway. And it never occurred to me to even listen to the radio, see what the weather report. We could have listened to it in the car. But Jerry kind of walked the floor all night long because it was raining so hard, and there was a tin roof on our beach house, so that doubled the sound of the rain coming down. And so he could not sleep, and he just kept walking around. Well, just at the break of day, the wind started blowing, and we had a breezeway between where the bedroom and living room was and the little camper trailer that started the house. There was a breezeway, and so Mama had some bamboo drapes on it was a had been a screened in porch, and she had bamboo drapes on them, and they were blowing so hard and making a lot of racket. So we went in there and put the picnic table and anything else we could find up against them to keep them from blowing so hard. But the weather was so bad, we had decided that we were going to just go home. So we cleaned up the place because I didn't want to leave a mess. We cleaned up and made sure everything was put back where my mother had it, and we got our stuff in the car. So I was gathering up my record player and everything to put it in the car, and I happened to look up toward where the ocean was, and I could actually see, which this is the phenomenon, I could see the ocean above the sand dune ridge, and it was billowing, and it scared me because I had always, if I wanted to know if it was high tide or low tide, I always had to walk over there because you couldn't see the ocean from our house. And so I just looked at that and I screamed, and Jerry came running and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Look at that. The ocean is above the dune ridge." So he went running over there, and he didn't even get to the main highway because the water was coming through the low places, the pathways that we had there, and under people's houses on the front row. So he came running back and he said, "Get whatever else you want in the car because we are leaving here right now." the water is already rising. So we threw the rest of it in the car, closed up the house, got in the car, and started down, because there's a little secondary road in the back, and we were back there. So we had to drive maybe a half a block up to the little connector road. And so we started there, but the water was already up to the fenders on our car. So we backed up to the house, because we had a Jeep there. And we jumped in the Jeep, but of course it was wet. It wouldn't crank because it was a genuine surplus Army Jeep. And it wouldn't crank because everything in the engine was soaking wet. So he said, we're going to start walking because we have got to get out of here. Maybe we can walk up as far as Shannon's store and catch a ride with somebody. So we started walking, but we didn't walk very far. We walked because we were already with wet feet, because the water was up around our ankles and knees when we left the house. But by the time we got to where that connector road was, it was like at our knees. And there was everything in the water. I mean, everything in the water. But it wasn't bothering us, because it was like us, it was trying to get out of there. And so we decided we better go up there to the Cromer's cottage, which was a 2-story house that these people, they were in real estate, and they rented
How far west were you on the island?
Oh no, we were east.
You were east.
Yeah, we were east.
Okay.
The western part of the island really hadn't been built then much. There was a house down there that was up on a sand dune, and that was owned by the Capels that owned the Capel.
The one that's still there.
Yeah, the one that was left, because they were on a high dune ridge.
Right.
And yeah, so they that was way west from us, because they were, you know, we had a big sand dune everybody called the Big Dune. We used to love to go there and slide down the sand and stuff like they did at Kitty Hawk. So we started walking, and we decided to go to that house and go upstairs. So by the time we got to the steps to go up there, the water was already like waist deep, and there was a strong current in it. We had a hard time, or I did, getting a hold of the banister railing so I could pull myself up on the steps to go upstairs and get inside. So of course we had to break in to the house to get inside. And then once we got inside the house, we could stop long enough to look at what was happening around us. And this house was just 2 apartments that these people rented for the summer, and they had their office was built right beside it, going west on the western side of this house. And they were in real estate sales and rentals, and it was just a little cinder block. You know, back in those days, they built everything out of cinder blocks because it was new. It was a new product. And I can tell you, when that hurricane came through, the mortar between those, and we saw it happening, the mortar between the cinder blocks just disintegrated, and the pile of cinder blocks just fell to the ground. So there was nothing left except the roof laying on top of a bunch of cinder blocks. So we kept watching what was happening from all 4 sides of the house, and we could see at one time we could see a man in a yellow slicker down in the road chasing the trash cans and the lids for the trash cans and trying to get them back to the cottages where they came from. But it was a futile attempt. And this man's name was Charlie Trott. He was from Southport. And I didn't know who he was at the time. I didn't know who he was until after the storm was over. But we could see him from time to time, because there was a little circle of cottages, like little one-story houses that were built just on, cinder blocks in the little house, and they floated. They just floated right up like little boats, and were just floating around out there on the water. And because we could watch the water come through the two-story houses that were on the other side, that were on the ocean side, had garages underneath the house. And we could see the water come through, it washed the dunes away, and it would come through the house, underneath the house, and if they had left a car there, the car would just float out. But the water would come through, and the garage doors would just be ripped off. And all of that was going on around the house that we were in. And I said to Jerry, because at the time when I was 17, I was in the Rainbow for Girls organization sponsored by the Masonic Lodge, and it was for daughters of Master Masons, which my father was. So Whiteville had a really nice chapter, and I was a member of the Rainbows, and of course everything we did was based on scripture. And I also sang in the youth choir at the Baptist church, and was part of that church family. So I believed in prayer, and even at 17, it was a real strong part of my life. And so I kept saying to Jerry, I said, I'm going to pray. You need to pray with me. And he just looked at me and he said, I'm going to watch the storm. You go ahead and pray, which I did. And I had my little white Bible, which I used for my rainbow ceremonies and things. And then I had that with me. When we got out of the car, I took it out of the glove compartment and stuck it down in my bra. And so I had my Bible with me, and I took it out and I prayed, and I watched the storm and I prayed. And so then when we were watching the storm, and Jerry would scream at me, he said, come here, you got to see this. And those little cottages, the Ramseur cottages that I was talking about that was next door in a semicircle, were floating around like boats, and they would crash into each other or into other houses that were floating. And when they did, they would just disintegrate. And then you would see refrigerators and couches and mattresses, and all the furniture would just be out there on the water floating. And so twice we were standing on the porch, and we had one of the cottages come at us, and it looked like it was coming at an oblique angle and was going to crash right into the porch where we were standing. But miracle of miracles, when the next wave came, instead of pushing it into the house, it pushed it alongside of the house, and it just floated like right beside us. We could have stepped off the porch of the house we were in to the roof of that little house. And then it happened again on the other side of the house. So we had one happen on the right side and one same thing happened on the left side. But it looked like the next wave that came, it was at an angle across from us, and it looked like it was just going to push right into the house where we were and knock it down. And so, as I said, I kept praying. And but when we saw those houses come, we stood in the doorway and wrapped our arms around each other and were holding on to the door facings, waiting for that crash to happen. And miracle of miracles, we were spared. And so we went inside to try to decide what we were going to do, because we saw all this stuff floating on the water, and just about all the houses were gone by then, and the water itself was up to the top of the electric poles or the telephone poles that were out there, and the water had been going up. Our house was not floating, and so we knew it wasn't going to be long before we were going to have to evacuate that house. And so we started looking around for flotation materials. And we went into the bedroom, and there was a little chest of drawers that fit right. It was about the same size of the window. So Jerry took the drawers out and propped it in the window, and he said, now if you feel this house falling, you grab onto this chest and hold on and float on it, because it's going to float. You hang on to this and float, because I couldn't swim. And but the minute we turned our back and walked away from it, a huge breaker hit the house and just shook the whole house, and the thing fell out of the window, and it went floating off. So then we had to look for something else that I could float on, and I suggested a mattress. I said, there's mattresses floating everywhere out there. And so the mattresses, of course, in that rental house were flimsy. So we got one, and we could roll it enough that we could jam it in the window and then let it relax, and it stabilized in the window. And so then we could feel underneath. This is the weirdest thing. We could feel underneath. Of course, I was barefoot. I'm barefoot all the time. I talk about the barefoot Contessa. And but we could feel the water underneath the floor, and it felt like when you're in a boat and you can feel the water underneath the boat. We could feel that. That's the way that water in the downstairs apartment felt. It hadn't come above the floor level yet, but we knew it wouldn't be long, and we could hear the dishes and things falling out of the cabinets below us. And so we were sure that it wouldn't be very long before either some furniture down there or something would float up and probably break through our floor. So we knew that we had to make an escape fairly quickly. And so we went back to where the mattress was, and we found a blanket that was on the bed, and it was back then a little flannel blanket. And so we took that blanket and stretched it on the bias and rolled it and made a rope type thing and tied an end to each of us, so that when we got on the mattress, we were still going to be tied together. And so, and I'm still jamming that Bible down my shirt. And actually, I had on one of Jerry's sweaters, and because it was October, it was pretty chilly that morning. And So we decided it was time to leave the cottage, and we had noticed that when things that were floating on the water would get grounded on this high dune that was behind where our house was located. There was a big sand dune back there, and we had noticed that most everything floating in the water would ground on that sand dune. So Jerry put the mattress out, and he put it out on the bias and had one corner of the mattress wedged up in the window. And I climbed out of the window onto the mattress and laid with my head at that corner and then down. And I was holding on to the straps. Back then the mattresses had straps on the side so you could manage them on the bed. I wish they still did. But so he was holding on to the corner of it, and I slid down on it with my head pointing toward that corner point toward him, and was holding on to the straps on the side. So he eased himself out of the window and pushed the mattress away from the house, but he jumped into the water and was holding on to the sides of the mattress. And just as we did that, now here it comes again, miracle of miracles. Just as he jumped into the water, a breaker came through that house and broke out a section of the exterior wall that was probably 4 by 4 feet, and it popped up right beside him where he could get his arm on it, and he grabbed it and pulled himself up on it so that he had it underneath his legs like he was sitting on it, and then he pulled the mattress up on his lap so that the two of us were closer together. And yet he wasn't on the mattress, he was holding the mattress, and he was on that section of exterior wall, and that was our raft. And so we turned loose the house, and we were at God's mercy from that moment on. And what we didn't realize during all this time that we were putting ourselves out there and everything, we were in the eye of the storm. We did not know anything about the eye of the storm and what it does, because it had been quiet and we were getting all this done. And then when we turned loose that house and started floating, everything changed. The winds and the rains came back, but they were coming from the different direction. So we didn't go in the direction we thought we'd go in up to that sand dune like everything else had been going. We just went out to open water, not out to the ocean, because we were going back toward the inland waterway. And so here we were on this makeshift raft. I was on the mattress, and he had the mattress up in his lap. And my little white Bible kept floating up under my chin, and I kept sticking it back down. Stephanie has that Bible now, I gave it to her. And so he was bent over the mattress like this, and I had turned on my stomach and was laying flat, and we had no control over anything. We were at the mercy of whatever happened from that point on, and we floated. There were things in the air that would fall on the mattress. I mean, things like 2x4s and anything that was blowing around in the wind would land on us, and it's a wonder there wasn't something stronger that actually would have killed one of us, but it did not. That did not happen. So as we went on our journey in this open water, then all of a sudden we were stopped by tree limbs, and we were hung up in a tree over on the bank of the inland waterway, where those trees, those beach myrtles and things like that grow. It was a little, it was just a little patch of ground that had foliage growing on it, but the waterway was still some yards away from where we were, but we were caught in the trees, and there was nothing we could do because it was raining hard. The rain felt like bullets hitting us, and so then Jerry let go of the raft he had underneath him, and he climbed up on the mattress because we were not going anywhere. We were hung in that tree. And so we both stretched out flat as we could on the mattress because things were falling on top of us, and we just had to let it fall. Well, there's nothing we could do to protect ourselves. So then some time passed, and all of a sudden I looked up and I saw the sun, and my first thought was, that beautiful sun is the last time I'm ever going to see it. And I started praying, and I want to correct, I mean, there are things you pray for and there are things you pray about. At a time like that, you pray for salvation because you know you're dying. That's your last day, and you just pray that you're going to be with God. And so that's what I was doing. I was just praying as hard as I could for our salvation. There was no way out. And so then all of a sudden I noticed the reeds that grow on the marsh, in the marsh grass, the foliage that grows in the marsh grass. It's like it shot up. Out of the water. It looked like it was shooting up, but what was happening was the water was receding, and it was going out so fast that it looked like it was being shot from the bottom. And it startled me at first because I didn't know what it was right at first, and then I realized that the water was going away and that we were safe, we were okay, and we started talking and about what we had seen and how we were going to get out of there, and we didn't know exactly, of course we didn't know where we were in relationship to where we started or anything, so we had to figure out once the water receded enough that we could climb down out of that tree and get to the sandbar that was underneath us. Then there was a small little tributary going by that before you could get to the mainland. So Jerry climbed down, and then he helped me down, and we found a 2x4. And so he swam across that little tributary, and I floated across, and I hung on to the 2x4, and he pulled me to the other side with the 2x4. And so then we were on the mainland, and it looked like a bomb had dropped on it. It was, I mean, in my 17-year-old mind, it looked like some of the movies that we had seen, you know, of the end of time and all this stuff, these monster movies, because everything was flat. I was accustomed to having sand dunes. Long Beach used to have the beautiful barrier dunes, just like you see on Caswell Beach when you go down to that end, because their dunes were not destroyed. Only Yopon, from Yopon back to Long Beach, all of that was flattened. And so, because back in the 50s when we went to the beach, we went to Long Beach, and Yopon Beach had not been developed then. And so we actually drove through the woods to get to Long Beach. And it was startling to see. I mean, it was beautiful. The sun was out, the clouds were gone, and the storm was gone, the wind was gone, but the ocean was flat. It was flat, and there were just slight ripples going down the beach, but the beach was flat. It was flat as a floor. No sand dunes, nothing, and you could just see forever when you looked toward the ocean. Coming off the beach was another issue, because the storm in it, when it was receding, because Hazel traveled fast. It probably traveled faster than most any hurricane that's ever struck, because usually, you know, they linger and they meander around maybe, you know, 2 or 3 miles an hour or something like that. But Hazel was fast. She had some motor behind her. So when she passed through, when she dumped all of her water on Long Beach and then left, receded, the recession was so strong that it ripped huge chunks of land and highway and everything. It just ripped it out. I mean, it was big. Where the road was, the beach road was that we came in and out on, it was just ripped out. We literally had to climb down them. All of the like water pipes and sewer pipes were exposed, and we would have to walk or wade. We didn't have to swim across to the other side and then climb up any way we could to get up on the other side of the road. And there were several of those that we had to do, and I saw my mother on the other side, and my stepfather, of one of these chasms. My stepfather saw us first, and he grabbed her and pointed, and I could see him say, I couldn't hear him, "There they are." And she fainted dead away. She completely passed out, because she was there through thick or thin, but in her heart she didn't think she was going to find us, I don't think. And when we were really there, she just passed out. Because listen, she came to Long Beach during that storm. She left home when she knew that storm was hitting Long Beach. They were saying on the radio. And she told my stepfather, she said, "I know my child is at that beach, and I'm going to find her. You can go or you can stay, but I'm going." And she did. She got in her automobile, and she drove from Whiteville to Long Beach. They would have to stop for the road crews to move trees off the road so they could continue their journey. And they drove in as far as they could go, and of course the National Guard was there and stopping cars from coming. Of course, she couldn't get on the island for all of the road was just torn out, but she was determined she was going to find me. And I mean, she even told that guy at the National Guard, she said, the only way you're going to stop me from going to look for my child is you're going to take that gun right there and shoot me. And so, but when she saw me, she couldn't take it. It was funny in its own way, but it just, when you stop and think of all the miracles that took place, and there are people that don't believe in miracles, but I saw a lot of miracles that day, and so I have all my life been a great believer in miracles. I know they happen because I've seen them. And I had another miracle in recent years. I had a terrible automobile accident right up here on Highway 17, right outside of Bolivia. And my car actually flew. I broadsided a sewer, the ridge of the sewer that went under the road right out there to this side of Leland. And my car slid down the embankment and broadsided that little barrier and nearly cut my car in half. And it threw me up in the air, and the car actually went up in the air and did a flip and fell down in the sewer thing, or the water drain, where the water drains from under the road. And I was thrown out of the car, and I landed on my back with my feet going back toward Wilmington. And I was awake the whole time. I never passed out. I knew everything that was happening to me. And when people would come to see me after that, and I was telling them what had happened, they'd say, "Oh, you had a miracle." And I'd just say, "Ain't my first one." And so that's the story of Hurricane Hazel, and continued it with Connie.